meeting. Al Adelot, the chairman, is not here, but will join us probably around 9 o'clock, so we'll all act as chair. I'm acting chair just for this segment. My name is Roy Chaplin, and the other members are
Susan Zephyr,
Steve Oppenheimer,
Joe Layden, town planner.
So the first order of business is if there's public comment. If there's anyone that wants to say something, please feel free.
Traffic and Sidewalk.
Okay.
do you want to say hi to Steve?
Say hi to Steve. Ah.
Oh,
Good evening. So we're going to start with traffic study.
Okay, so we got a. My understanding is that we may have been taking the monster.
Probably monster first.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually,
there's a lot
I
of
may have gotten
traffic.
ahead of myself. Do you want to take updates later, or do you want to take?
Yeah, we'll just take the items under general business later.
Okay. That's not something good.
So monster, Giles Snehan with Vanessa and Associates, and you should have a copy of our December 3rd memo.
Actually, I have Bob Michaud's. I actually did not print off a copy.
I probably have a
I remember.
copy. And just briefly, so Monster will occupy about 170,000 square feet, 75,000 square feet space within that existing development that Biogen's there now. They're going to bring in about 622 employees. Biogen has moved out about 626 employees, so it's very comparable in terms of employee count. Typically, Monster will have about 17% or about 100 employees will telecommute, so they will probably not be there on any given day. It varies, but they also bring in about 50 employees who come in from off-site, stay at a hotel and go there. So it's still roughly about the same number. They will be moved in phased in over February. So I think around President's Day weekend thereafter, they will phase in their employees over the month of February. The monitoring stuff that we've done to date for Boston properties that's been submitted to the town, the traffic at that site's been about 80% of what's been projected in the original traffic studies done for that development. So it's still been under what's been projected, and it'll probably stay that way when Monster moves in. It'll be less traffic than was projected back in 2007.
Will it be more than current Boston properties, or comparable?
It'll probably be very comparable. Again, it's about the same amount of employees. It's tough to really predict who's coming in when, but it's the same amount of employees. It seems like there may be a net less people on site with their telecommuting. So it really, I would expect it to be comparable, but time will tell. Obviously, most of the traffic is going to be destined towards 128. We've had probably in the range of 70-30 split around that range. Monster may not be less than that. It just really see how it pans out. The next monitoring study for that site is due in September of next year. So at that time, like we've done in the past, we'll do morning and afternoon traffic counts at the driveway. So we'll be able to compare that to what happened when Biogen was there fully, as well as the past studies that we've done for projections. So we'll be able to compare how things did change rather than speculate. We can talk about all we want tonight, but at the end, there'll be numbers at the end of the year that'll say here's exactly what happens there. We'll also be looking at traffic that goes to Rolling Lane and Summer Street in terms of who comes out or to the site and travels to those roadways. That's always been a sensitive issue for the town, so that'll be looked at again in September. And that's really about it. It's really pretty simple. It should be very comparable. But in the end, when we look at that in September, we'll have real data to really tell you what's exactly happening with the changes.
Also, quick question then. So this traffic obviously will come in mostly from 128 and exit. So do you think that there might be a net loss of traffic coming down Summer Street?
You know, it's really tough to say. And I think that the amount of traffic was probably in the order of, on Summer Street, maybe 10 or 15 cars during those monitoring periods. So it may change a little bit. It's really tough. So again, we'll be reporting that in September.
Did your study take into account where Monster.com's employees live?
Well, we took a look at their zip code data. We filed that and gave that to your consultant in the whole town. and we try to estimate where they would come in from, and so we thought they may be around a 90-10 split, where 90% would go to 128, and so maybe a little less traveling through your community with Monster, but it's tough to tell, because also, I think they're moving from Maynard, so going from Maynard to this facility, some people may move, so it's really kind of speculative, but I think in the end, I don't think it's going to be dramatically different about this.
The takeaway seems to be, though, that it's about a net wash, that
I
Biogen's giving out about 600 plus, and Monster's going to get 600 plus. There's the issue of telecommuting, so there might be possibly a diminishment. But my question is, the capacity of this development, is it 80% occupied with now?
No, I think it's been fully occupied. So what the 80% number comes from comparing it to what the traffic projections were, and typically Bob would tell you, we usually over-project in traffic, and it's nice to be conservative, so when it all said and done, we looked at studies that we did in 2007, there's been less traffic with the developments in place, but it also is a function of employee density.
Right.
Now, I think the Monster density is similar to Biogen density, so it's going to be about the same, but if you had an employee who came in with really high density, then things would change, but that's not expected.
One of the things that I remembered from the last traffic study was that when 128 is jammed, people will find an alternative route, in other words, to get to the building, and that was one of the concerns.
I think that happens whether it's Weston or Waltham or any of these communities. When 128 jams up, the local streets are much different.
So, Chair, just to weigh in, Bob Misha with MDM Transportation Consultants. So everything Giles says is consistent with what was published in his December letter, and we had a chance to quantify and take a closer look at certain characteristics. So this is what was presented, which is based on some fairly recent count information for the Boston property site. This is September 2013 data. Snapshot in the morning and again in the evening, and what that indicates is that the Boston property site, Biogen IDAC, is generating just under 400 total vehicle trips over the course of an hour in the morning, and less than that in the evening, 332. Those are about, as Giles mentioned, between 20 and 30% lower than the originally projected volumes for full use of the building.
Right.
What's interesting is that while it is 20 to 30% lower overall, there are very specific movements. For instance, in the morning, the left turn into the property was originally estimated to be about 122 vehicles over the course of that hour. It's 114. So that particular movement, which is a critical movement, right, is right where it was predicted to be.
So those are the cars coming through town?
Correct.
Heading east?
Correct, right. So roughly 31% of the activity for the building, just under a third, is actually affecting the Route 20 corridor and the Summer Street corridor. In the evening, the distribution is a little more skewed toward 128. And it's an interesting characteristic which we'll describe in our findings of the quarter study for Summer Street, that Summer Street, in fact, serves as a relief valve, a shortcut, if you will, for communities that reside, say, in the Wayland area, Framingham, and on occasions when 128 gets jammed, is the best way to put it. But the numbers are generally consistent with what was permitted for the property. No concerns there. Interestingly, how this relates to the Summer Street corridor, which again will be presented in more detail in the overall presentation, is that in the early years of monitoring, these are the volumes that would reflect those motorists that are working at Biogen IDAC, C, and going to it from Summer Street. Right? So the relationship between the Boston property site and Summer Street, and the green box represents the number of vehicles that are actually being generated along Summer Street into the property. In 2011, that was 11. It went up to 20 in 2012, and now it's at 30 in 2013. So there's definitely been a trend. The reverse in the evening, which is the orange box, would show you're still increasing it at a smaller number, 7 in 2011, 5 2012, and 11 in 2013. So really, depending on when you're looking at Summer Street Corridor, it does reflect its importance as a cut-through bypass to 128 and other regional roads. And that's the subject of our quarter study, which will follow this discussion. We concur with the findings that Giles had mentioned, that this is nearly an even swap in employment. There's a very slight increase in density for the space that will be occupied by the monster employees. On average, 280 square feet per employee in South Calton. That's not inconsistent with what you normally see in most office buildings along the 128 corridor. So it's really effectively fully occupied. It's fully occupied now, and it will be swap. So nothing alarming.
It is interesting, so they're relocating from Maynard. So I would think the traffic patterns, that a lot of them live quite far west of Weston. I would think that they would impact 117 and in Church Street. Yeah, that's where the impact
And Route 20.
And that little short stretch, so you know how like it's a hellhole in the middle of town now in the morning, and backed up, the school buses can't get through, by the church there. It'd be interesting to see how that works.
Right, and as Giles mentioned, there will be a subsequent monitoring period where that can actually be quantified.
Really? So that we could actually go up and take a look at what's
Well,
going on?
not at that exact location,
Right.
but we'll know who's arriving to or from the
Right.
western portion of Route 20 and
Yeah.
see whether or not there is a skew toward 128 or not. That would be important.
Yes,
Yeah, just reiterate what you just said.
if you just say.
I'm Peter Hilton, the Traffic and I'm Chair of the Traffic and Sidewalk Committee, and the committee is very concerned because we feel that most of those people will be coming from the west because they're out in the west suburb, and so we're wondering if you actually can monitor Church and 117 and Wellesley Street and Wellesley and Route 20, because both of those intersections, I believe, are at level F presently, and it's a real problem. My third point is that I've come through at night when there's been no cars coming out of Janai Day, and that light has still turned red, and I thought that was not supposed to occur.
Our last review of the signal was that it was working properly, and there are minimum applications of green time to side streets, not on every cycle necessarily, but we can certainly take another look at that.
Yeah, because I've gone through there at night and there's not been a single car coming up, and that light's turned red.
And there are, because that's a Mass DOT location, there's a policy that Mass DOT has of how signals are programmed so that while most of the time the green might be resting in Route 20 and there's no call on the
Right.
side street, if for some reason the loop is broken or equipment's malfunctioning, there's a built-in redundancy that periodically call that side even if there's not a car there. And it's just a fail-safe, and that could be what you're observing, but we can certainly take a look at it, and it will be subject to monitoring again.
You will maybe monitor 117 in Church and Wellesley, because I would imagine those people will be coming from the west. I doubt they'll be coming from 128.
Isn't that beyond the purview of the study?
It really is beyond the purview of the study. I think what the monitoring study is intended to do is to say, okay, now that we have a baseline in which to understand how the full occupancy of the building works, and those are the actual numbers, we know that a third or 31% of the activity for that site is coming to or from the west on Route 20, which would affect the locations you're talking about.
Right.
If in the subsequent monitoring, that 114 becomes 200,
Right.
then that triggers an action.
Triggers that.
It triggers an action, and that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Finish. I'm sorry.
So that action could be, an evaluation of those locations to determine what effect, or some other action along Summer Street. And the applicant at that time, in Boston Properties, has allocated monies that are now sitting in an escrow account that can be used to address issues like that as they arise. So there's a mechanism to deal with that. And that, in fact, was one of the driving forces behind the study of the Summer Street corridor. recognizing that there is a relationship between this site and Summer Street in particular, and certainly other locations west.
Thing is, I happen to know that the first Biogenetic new building in Cambridge was opened around September. So that could already reflect a reduced amount. And now that both buildings are open there, I think if anything, there's going to be an increase in traffic immediately because the population at Biogenetic and Weston has been gradually decreasing over the months as they all moved back to Cambridge. So I think there's going to be a spike in traffic that may even be noticeable. I mean, I'm hoping that's not the case, but it's not like Biogen moves out one day and Monster comes in the next.
Right. Question through the chair to John. My understanding was that the building at the time of the surveys was in fact active.
Yeah, we reported how many employees were there. So I don't think that's changed that dramatically, and I think that there's certainly going to be a spike over what's there now, but I don't think, and again, the numbers will bear out in September, I don't think there's going to be a big spike in what we found in September, so.
We also have numbers from 2012.
Right, we have this kind of a track record there, so.
And how did those compare, do you know, 2012 versus 2013?
The numbers have gone up as occupancy has increased in the building. And essentially, they've hit a ceiling, if you will, on the number of employees that they can have in the building. In terms of practical floor area per employee. So they're right at 300 square feet per employee right now, which is, you don't want to get much less than that. In my experience working with employers like Staples, for instance, who have in fact broken down walls and put up cubicle farms to try to compress and make their space more efficient, even in those cases, I don't think you have an employee density of less than 208 square feet per employee. Anything smaller than that, it's cramped, it's not efficient, and then you lose the economy of scale. It just doesn't work. So my opinion and my experience is that the building is at full occupancy, and it was at full occupancy as stated in their monitoring report when these counts were done. So if that is in fact the case, and I believe it is, these numbers should represent the worst case scenario in terms of volume in and out of the site. And subject to the monitoring in September, I would expect the numbers to be similar. And the question is the distribution. Is it in fact skewed or not?
And I don't understand why Monster's data wouldn't show that a lot more are coming from the west, like we think. I mean, you say that they're similar.
Well, again, what you're doing is you're taking 600 employees and you're trying to see what towns they are and trying to speculate and look through maps and look through directions of how they're going to get in. I mean, you can speculate all you want. People live on communities, how they're going to get here in the end. Do that, probably look at different numbers, but in the end, in September, you're going to know.
Right, but I mean, you can look at Biogenetic's population, and there's probably a lot more people coming from Boston and Cambridge than Monsters, let's say. So if you forgot how they were going to actually get there, but you just looked at where they live, whether they live west of 128 or east of 128, I think that would tell you something. I'm just surprised that either you're saying that it's not going to be that different or that you don't know, because it seems like we should have some idea.
Well, we've estimated it, and we don't think it'll be that much different. Again, you'll know in September. I mean, I'm sure people that live in similar communities take different travel routes to get to Boston.
It's dynamic too.
It is so dynamic, and so it's the simplest things to this whole monitoring program. The numbers are the numbers; you'll know what they are, and there's criteria, there's the old studies, there's estimations. And soon enough, you'll know exactly. And the point of the monitoring program again is to see the distribution and then see who's using summer and who's using rolling lane, because those are very sensitive to the community. So that'll be done, and we'll know those numbers.
Other questions?
No, I was just going to add on to the light issue, because we had a lot of problems with the lights when they first opened. They seem to have fixed them, but I had noticed a couple of times later on in the evening someone would come out and they stop and take right on red coming out of the facility, but it would still trigger the loop, so after they were gone,
Oh, then it
the
would
light
look
would
like.
change.
Yeah.
So it
but
appeared
was
like
no
there wasn't
leak.
any car there.
Right, but they were long gone.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
That happens in a lot of cities,
Right.
quite frankly. You know, they trigger the loop and then they're gone.
Anything else you want to add?
No, it's, I hadn't really noticed anything earth shattering. I asked my dispatcher to go in and pull up all the complaints or all the issues that were resulting from that particular piece of property. We had a couple of issues with, the road rage because the lanes
yeah.
are merging back together. And we've gone down on the building for some complaints of employees and stuff, but I imagine that would happen anywhere. Other than that, there's really no numbers there that show that there's a problem at the location.
Excellent.
No, more up towards the road.
Yes.
Hi, it's Julian Dave Harmon from Summer Street. We've lived there over 30 years, and 2 summary statements and then a little bit of detail. Number one, we and a lot of our neighbors think that the best thing that ever happened was to have Biogen come in and have that light put in. And number two, I think we're dealing
Why
with
do
the
you say
wrong.
that, Dave?
Pardon?
Why do you say that?
Well, because
Slow things down.
Did it slow things
you
down?
can now get out on the Route 20 going
okay,
west
all
or
right.
east because the traffic stops
Right.
going east
Right.
or it stopped going
Oh, I
west and you
gotcha.
can get out. And the traffic light at what is it, Wellesley Street stops the traffic there, so you have a break coming down. So it's much easier. We all feel it's much
Yeah.
easier to get out. I'm sure there's people that feel the other way, but I can tell you that all the people that we've talked to, and we can name a number of them, feel it's the best thing that ever happened. Number two, our eating area looks out on Summer Street, facing east. And, all the scientific stuff is interesting, but we don't notice any increase in traffic. The traffic that comes on Summer Street is going to Meadowbrook School to and from 7:30 to, 8:15. Our son is 1/30th of the cars that he drives from Wellesley and he comes over to Summer Street, honks his horn, and then goes to. But other than that, there's no discernible difference now that Biogen is there between what was there before Biogen and what's there now. The most interesting question that I think should be asked is, whereas Summer Street from Cedar Road south is in great shape, Summer Street from Cedar Road north is probably the worst street in town in terms of the pavement, potholes, etc. And it would be interesting to make a study of what the cost is to the town, to the ambulances, the fire trucks, the police cars, etc., from going on from Route 20 to Cedar Street on Summer Street on the way to the nursing homes down there, because we get a lot of traffic on that. And it's a planning board historic issue for this reason. The planning board very presciently saw that there would be a problem when Meadowbrook School had all those construction trucks going down Cedar Road, north on Summer Street to Route 20. And the pavement has just deteriorated to a serious extent.
You mean you specifically noted this
Potholes.
after all the construction?
That's right.
Is it on schedule to be repaid?
Pardon?
Is it on schedule to be repaid?
I don't know. The selectmen said the other night they're trying to save $100,000 here and there, and that
Joe,
will.
do you know if that's on?
I don't know
If it's on the repayment schedule for
I don't-
DPW?
But the point is that it's probably going to cost $100,000 because of the extreme damage to the pavement. And you all saw the problem coming, and the building inspector, it's history, but the building inspector let it happen. So the other problem is the construction trucks coming from across the 7th hole at the golf course up at that estate up there on the hill. The guy that paid $100,000 to the planning board when he said, you can try to restrict me all you want, but I'm going to build that house up there.
He paid us off?
No, he didn't pay you off.
What are you saying? It sure sounded that way.
He paid the
Didn't
fine
get
in
bad money.
advance.
He took his lumps early.
Yeah, and he's had incredible numbers of construction trucks that go down Meadowbrook Road, Cedar Road, Summer Street to Route 20. And that heavy truck traffic is the problem. So I hope if you're as prescient in the future as you were in the past, that you can incorporate some sort of, and I don't know if it's possible, but I hope you can incorporate some sort of fee or penalty or something to these large projects in Weston when they're going to have heavy trucks going month after month after month. And what it does to the pavement, because it's going to cost, as I say, I'll bet it's going to cost $100,000 because of the extreme damage to the road. So you saw it come in, you weren't able to do anything about it, and it happened.
Yeah, that's a really good question, as to whether you can require restitution
I'm
for
sure.
public roadway use. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys must have noticed the difference between Cedar Road North and Cedar Road South, and the fact that there's an extreme difference in the quality of the pavement.
Well, that's a really good question for town council, whether there's a state law that says no, the public roadways are the public roadways, and there you go. You
We
know.
paid a price.
Yeah, and
one way or
that's
the
right,
other.
and then, you know, it's your job to maintain them, or, I don't know.
But the cost is socialized in other words.
Yeah, I don't know.
You didn't get it back in tax because it's a tax-free institution.
Oh, well, that probably comes into the Dover.
Yeah.
So just, and because some of this I think is going to be really relevant when we get into discussion on a corridor study. But just to sort of wrap this up, one of the reasons, or the main reason for Monster basically having the analysis done on Boston Properties having it done on Monster is that with the change in space, there was a question, and it's been a long sort of debated question since basically 2 years ago. Biogenetics said that they were leaving. And what is going to be the impact if one tenant or multiple tenants came in? And there was a lot of fear that you could have more than 2 tenants, multiples, 3, 4, and cause a huge impact. So as part of meeting with Monster.com before coming to, as part of their coming to Weston.
Boy, that was a slip.
Yeah, no kidding.
Good work, Joe.
Just
Been
think of
years.
Route 20.
Yeah.
So as part of their coming to Weston, we wanted some sort of demonstration that they're still falling under that umbrella that was established by the general special permit. And so what basically was stated tonight is that they're falling under that umbrella, but because we still have that periodic monitoring, we'll really be able to fine-tune and identify whether there is any cause for reevaluating things with Boston Properties under this special permit. And also there was a statement that the whole telecommuting, and that they may have a lot of seats, but the amount of time that people are there, that's something that is very difficult to categorize. So traffic consultants usually are more conservative. So as we go forward over the next year and with the fall monitoring study, get a better feeling and as far as what's happening. But I think then as part of this study, maybe towards the end, Bob can sort of say like what if things change, and what really the sensitivity would be on the core study and the recommendations, because maybe there is a change, but does it? To what extent does it change the results of this study?
You're right, and I forgot about the fact that we were in a panic that we would have multiple tenants in there, and how that would totally change everything we're really looking at.
But why is that a factor? You still got the same square footage and therefore the same seats per square foot.
It's because you could have different time schedules. I mean, this is pretty concentrated. They get in at a certain hour and they go at a certain hour. You've had a lot of smaller tenants who maybe had constant traffic going in and out during the day. Maybe they have clients, who come to visit them, so that you have, I don't know, whatever you have in there. You have a lot more out visitors coming in, so we felt it would really impact the traffic. Now you just have the employees. I don't think that they do a lot of, people just randomly visiting that building.
One other point, the police have done a fantastic job of monitoring the speed of the traffic. This is a politically unpopular idea, I'm sure, but it would be just as interesting to see, since they monitor the people going north, they don't monitor the people going to Meadowbrook that are in a hurry because they're late to drop off their kids because they're late to go to work. I don't think it's a safety issue, but intellectually it's an interesting problem, because when we had a neighborhood meeting over at Meadowbrook, we talked about that, the fact that if they get buses to take the kids there as they've done, that they're the ones that are in a hurry, not the ones that are going to Biogen.
No one hurries to go to work.
Oh.
Right,
They
it's a
hurry
whole
to get
different
rid-
thing.
They hurry to get rid of the kids at Meadowbrook, though.
What? Oh, like-
Any other comments?